Welcome to That's Effin' Weird. Tonight, we have Joseph, live in Hawaii, here to talk about some of the fires recently. And I think the way we're going to kind of go about this is we're going to kind of lay out the premise, what's going on. It's been in the news a lot. Some of the theories and everything we have over here in the mainland. And then we're going to kind of hear what his take on the ground floor. But we also have a guest. Clark, would you introduce the newcomer?
Oh, yes. This is my famed survivalist friend, Joey. So
The myth, the legend, finally here.
Joey. Yeah. Leonard Mead is what we call him.
Very cool. Well, good to have you on board. And Joseph, why don't you take us away? Kind of give us what's going on first, and then we'll talk about what we've heard.
Okay, yeah. I'll probably I want to preface this whole discussion just because it becomes a problem in a lot of people's when talking about this stuff. That my name is Joseph Pa'ahana. My family is from Lahaina, and they're from there for over 100 years. We're actually the native Hawaiian side of my family. And originally came from the island of Oahu, and that was like in the late 1800s. Moved to the west side of Maui, which is where Lahaina is located. So I know it becomes a thing when people speak about these kind of events, and they theorize and just look into the weirder aspects of it. That people get mad. And I want to let you know that I don't think that there's anything wrong with exploring the weirder aspects of it. And of course the government and the mainstream media will say like that it's irresponsible, that it's insensitive, and I can tell you that having family that experienced it, they look at it from a spiritual perspective as well, meaning that they look at aspects of it in a supernatural mind frame. So I just wanted to preface that because I know that becomes a problem for some people. But everybody knows of is the Maui fires, I believe, on the mainland. And which happened on the 8th of August, 2023. And just an interesting point before I end there is this fire event that was island wide, but mainly centered on the west side of Maui, happens on 808, and that is actually the zip code. Or is that the area code for Hawaii? So when people refer to Hawaii, we use the term 808 to describe the area. Kind of like a neighborhood call out. So that's interesting that it happened on 808.
Okay.
It's also the Korg.
Right, the Korg. Yeah, the beat machine. Yeah.
So 808 and heartbreaks, man.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, I would say, like, I don't know, like, I'm actually interested in what it's like from the outside and what people have heard, and if people are even following it, if it's big news. I'm actually interested in what you guys think first, because like I could just talk, but
okay.
I have a lot to say, but I'm actually, like, given the nature of this show, I'm interested in what the rumors are, or what, because there is things that are strange too, even Well, I'll get into it later. I'm sorry.
Okay, no. I'll go ahead and say what I've heard on my end. Okay, so I've had family members, people I know, and the general thing is that okay, if I was to break it all down, it was caused. Like this was an intentional thing for either bolstering up some properties that weren't touched and devastating the others to where the people that own the houses or land or whatever would have to sell. And then there's going to be a greater like reconstruction project down the road, and then it would be all owned by a particular billionaire or whatever. Now, the other side of it, where it gets a little bit more ridiculous and weird, is like the idea that different billionaires you've heard of, like Oprah amongst them, are using direct energy weapons to, scorch everything but their houses. And I've told you before, I've seen photos where, they give these examples of everything's a wasteland except for this one house. Now, granted, there's some of that going on, but from what I saw, it looked like there was some color trickery going on where some of the stuff was black and whited out, and then the stuff that was relatively untouched was more vivid, and something was kind of weird about that. But I've heard that kind of stuff. I've heard people specifically talking about direct energy weapons or just intentional arson. But that's on the weird end of it. But that is kind of the big pot that I hear constantly. Not that there's any like end to it. It's just like it's the same thing when this spy balloon, whatever that thing was. It's the same thing when Ocean Gate happened. People just go to those extremes, especially if they're not close to it. So that's why it's interesting to have your perspective. But Clark, what about you?
I mean, I don't think there's actually any connection like Ocean Gate to that stuff, but I do think there's actually maybe possibly some government. I think it's weird that like Oprah's and like other people's their properties in Maui have not been touched, but the fires have like conveniently gone around them. So
yeah.
I can tell you from like circles that I'm in, I know dudes that were like spinning up to go to Hawaii to help, if not direct action, help with armed conflict, basically against the U.S. government, to help train indigenous people to fight the government over their land being sold out from under them like that. I don't know who, as far as like starting it, the fires themselves, and I've heard all kinds of stuff. I'm sure we all have about like things that could have been done intentionally to do that. And I'm not saying that that's impossible, but I don't know that for sure. What I do know for sure is dudes that, again, like I kind of redacted. I can't be like their name is, but people that I know that run in certain circles were keying up to go be involved in that. That was a thing that was very heavily discussed, and they were getting gear together to go do that.
In terms of like relief stuff or like arm revolution.
Yeah, no. I guess just blatant revolution. Yeah, I don't know another word for it, man. Like I was trying to kind of skirt around that one, but I don't know another way to say it. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're like theoretically, right? Theoretically hearsay, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Yeah, I think there's I think like they say, like with conspiracy theory, there's like a grain of truth in all of it. And the thing with like where Oprah's her major purchases are in Kula, which is the sort of upcountry area. So Oprah's properties are fine, but they weren't as far as I know, they weren't like even in the same town as the major fire that was in Lahaina. They were up in Kula, where there were fires. And arguably, actually, they were the fires that drove. I think it's safe to say they were the fires that drove most of the fire response for the island that day away from Lahaina. because the early morning on the 8th, there was a fire up in the hills right outside of a neighborhood called Lahaina Luna, and right near an elementary school.
Okay.
And it was declared contained, meaning it wasn't out, but that it was under control at 9:30 in the morning. So they did have an evacuation of that area, but then they called them back. So they said, "Oh no, it's all good. You can come back home." So that already kind of set a sense of like that everything was okay. A false sense that everything was going to be okay early that morning. And then the actual fire broke containment, I think, around 2:30. And but then there was no warning. There was no subsequent warnings, and there was major power outages and no communication. As far as cell phones were spotty until it was completely off.
So that raises the question, like, if they had this fire contained, they're obviously still monitoring it, and nobody gave out a warning or anything when it broke containment.
Right.
How long after that event was it until they were like, "Yeah, this is a problem"?
This is the question. This is the real question, because what I was going to show you with that video that I gave you is they're using this video to show that YouTube video. They're using it to show that there was some sort of power line down, that the fire was started from a power line, and the focus on that and on like HECO and a lawsuit. HECO being like the PG&E of Hawaii, right? It's the major and utility provider for Hawaii, and they have a lawsuit, and now HECO is saying that they didn't cause the fire. So interestingly, the news puts out this video, which I'm not saying that the person who took the video didn't think that what they were filming was an electrical fire. I just think that the video actually doesn't end up showing that. And so it's interesting because it's going to give everybody the expectation that it was an electric fire, which it probably will end up being. But this video kind of gives people like a confidence that narrative is true. So it's interesting if the video played fine. It's interesting. You can kind of see how like it's not there. There's no evidence of a power line falling. And why I'm saying that is that this is the video that all the news outlets like Washington Post everywhere is showing in their timelines, where they're showing the timeline of the fire. But you could see that it doesn't show a power line down or a power line starting the fire. It just shows where the fire started.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? But
yes,
if those don't work, it's fine. The video what it actually I think shows, and it's not to like say that the person who recorded it is wrong or that didn't believe that's what he was recording. It just, in my opinion, looking at the area, it's probably just like a spectrum line, like an internet line that was down. And the funny thing is, if you are on the street view in Google Earth, you can look up this area. It's the area, the road on Lahaina Luna Road, directly below the elementary school, the middle school, Lahaina Intermediate. You can see, if you match up the video to the street view, you can see there's actually already the line that he's describing that's down. It's already in the images. So that line had been down for some time, so that like whenever they took the Google Street View photos, you could see the line there.
Whoa.
It's just an old it's just like an old cable line blowing in the wind. However, there is a substation just like a block from his house. So he describes hearing a pop and a sizzle. He might have heard that, and you can see on the Google Earth over, like if you're looking at the satellite photos, the edge of the burn, the top part, the upwind part of the burn lines up perfectly with the substation.
Okay.
So it could have ignited a fire. Maybe there was some sort of backup, explosion.
So is this where you're falling? Like the cause, but maybe necessarily the communication and whether or not they contain it probably is where the pointing of fingers should be.
Yeah. So basically, like here's the thing. is I don't know if you guys heard the emergency management guy say why he didn't use the sirens. Have you heard that?
No, I have not. No.
So the Maui's emergency management. So Hawaii has sirens on every island for tsunamis, hurricanes, and wildfires. Most commonly, they're used for hurricanes and tsunamis. Because wildfires are not usually that big, but they do happen. So he didn't use those, and he could have said anything, but what he said was, "I do not regret not using the sirens because people are typically trained to move upland for tsunamis because it's typically used for tsunamis. They're trained to go to seek higher ground, and that he didn't want people going into the fire."
Okay, or getting surrounded on like a hilltop.
Right, but
okay,
but it's a ridiculous statement because one it says that the people in this situation are like trained animals and they couldn't use reason.
Right.
So that's like a really terrible statement. And then it also admits that he knew that the situation was bad enough for him to even make a decision to not use them.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we got a fire big enough that if a whole bunch of people went in one direction, it's trouble. But so therefore,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry to cut you off, but he could have easily said no one was aware or could have anticipated how bad this fire was going to get and how quickly, and that would have let him off the hook.
Gotcha.
But he said, "I don't regret not using them because of these things." Maybe he misspoke. He ended up resigning hours later.
Wow.
So let me ask you this, man. You live there.
Yeah.
Y'all experience wildfires commonly enough? Like this wouldn't be nobody's ever thought about this happening. Like this is a thing that you knew was capable of happening.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is the crazy thing is, okay, the mayor, I don't know if you guys seen much of the press about the mayor. Everybody's hating the mayor right now because of his attitude and the way he's treating the situation. That mayor that's there now was elected on the 22nd, or not the 22nd, rather, the 2022. So just a year ago, just under a year ago.
Okay, but so when y'all have like
what I was going to say was on that night there was a large fire in Lahaina. So brush fire. In 2020, I believe there was another brush fire, and then in 2018 there was a large brush fire that took out houses with a hurricane.
Okay, so what I'm kind of trying to piece together here is like if they had sounded these emergency sirens, it wasn't like everyone knew on the island that there had been a fire earlier, correct?
Oh, everybody in Lahaina knew there was a fire earlier.
Okay, so it's not like they would think, oh, well, this is clearly a tsunami. Everybody's mind would have probably gone to, oh, fire is...
Yeah, that's the thing, is the whole town was engulfed in smoke before the fire even hit the rest of the town.
Okay.
Okay. I see why you're saying this is. I was trying to wrap my head about why you think it's so ridiculous, but now that makes way more sense.
Yeah. So like basically, the fire. This is like Joey pointed out a really good question. Like breaking containment. This fire, obviously, in the morning, threatened homes. So they did issue an evacuation, not using sirens, but like on phones. But then they let them back in. But then the later evacuation never happened. At least not to an effect that was useful because nobody had cell service.
Well, and the reason that's so weird to me is because where I worked, I former law enforcement. So like even if we just had a structure fire in a residential area, we're pulling people out of the houses next to it. And once the fire's out, it's not like we're all leaving. And that's when the fire's out. Like, this isn't just, oh, it's contained. This is the fire's gone. We're still monitoring that on, like, eyes on scene until it's a 24-hour time. So if it does flare back up, or especially in the case where it's just contained, I would assume you would have people physically there watching to monitor what's going on with it. That just doesn't like shake out to me that somebody wasn't like, hey guys, fire's now spreading again.
Yeah, that's exactly it, man. Like, you nailed it. Like, from my perspective, and from what we know here, that's those kind of questions are being avoided, man. You got to see what the press is doing over here. It's crazy. Not the press necessarily, but how the government's response to the press, and you have an aspect of the press that's going to kind of like gatekeep for the rest, for the government, and then you have an aspect of the press that's going to push it. But for the most part, they're very cagey, man. The tactic is very interesting. They're cagey about talking about any of the time between the fire being considered contained, so like 9:30 and about 3:30. So they don't talk. They dodge any questions that relate to what was the communication at that period. They talk about their communications in the evening, but the fire had already taken most of the town by 4:30 in the afternoon. So you'll see the video and it'll look like it's nighttime, but it's not. It's just the black smoke.
So another question while we're on that is, when the power company that's being blamed for all this, the ones that allegedly are the cause of the fire initially, if they're talking about the lawsuits going towards them, have they started discussing anything? Has the power company come out with a statement or anything? Because I haven't seen anything on the news from the power company.
They're denying it.
Okay, so they are saying that it wasn't them and that they had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, I don't know the details of why they say that. Here's the thing is, I know people, so like I'm from there, I have friends there, I have family there. I went there the following Saturday, but no one is being let in, at least at that time. No one was being let in to the west side, the whole side of that island, so that you couldn't even get close to it. But for me, most of the people that I knew were already on the central side of the island. They had evacuated and gotten around the backside on a dirt road to get out of the town. And many people end up. Okay, so the point that I'm trying to get at is what you raised was they all tell me that they didn't have power all day.
Okay, so like the power would have already possibly have been shut off at this point. Let me ask you this, man. The vegetation that like I am picturing in my head, right? Like a jungle, like densely vegetated.
No.
Okay, so not that at all. So describe what kind of vegetation are we talking about? Like
it's arid grassland.
Okay.
So it's ripe for the fire. So if you look at a map of Hawaii, you can almost imagine the Hawaiian Islands like a sailboat, and it's referred to it in the sense of the geographically. So there's a windward side to the islands, and there's a leeward side to the islands, and the leeward side of the islands face south. So that leeward side is dry and arid for all islands.
Okay, so my follow-up question to that is, do they regularly do contained burns to like clear out?
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
here's the problem. Hawaii is super into the sort of environmentalism, sustainability, and we have some of the highest environmental standards. But here's the thing: Lahaina was a plantation town, and there was sugar plantations. So when I was growing up, there were controlled burns all the time in way of sugarcane burning. So they would burn the sugarcane to harvest it, and then they would mill the burnt sugarcane. So that would happen 3 or 4 times a year, where you'd have large, visible, like 100-foot flames, like next to the town, controlled. They wouldn't do it on a windy day, and they would like the plots are sectioned out, and there's roads that divide all the plots, and those would be like controlled burns, and that was happening for over 100 years.
Right.
So,
how long have they not been doing that? I guess.
Yeah. So, like, I think in 1996, I believe, the sugar plantations in Lahaina stopped, and I think in 2016, all sugar production ended in Hawaii. So,
okay, and since then, they
didn't do nothing. They haven't done anything, and those are privately owned lands. But there should be, if there aren't, regulations on the distance of like growth to like a 30-foot, but I can tell you that's probably not the case, that most of the grass growth is going right up to the neighborhoods.
Well, and I asked that because where we're at in our little chunk of the world, we have historically speaking a lot of wildfires here. And one of the reasons that we don't have that problem as much now is because of controlled burns. The Department of Natural Resources goes in and they'll do these controlled burns. Mm-hmm. Also, where we're at, we have a lot of like what used to be farmland, right? So it's clear, a lot of it's clear cut, and no one's doing anything with it anymore. So the state does step in and they'll clear it out and burn it. But that, I don't know, I think that's an interesting point, that for nearly 30 years nobody thought, hey, this is going to be a problem. Especially,
well, they actually wrote a study on the dangers of wildfires. I believe it was just last year. So they haven't done anything. Is the sad truth? There's the wanting to go towards new energies, you'd say, clean energies, whatever. It's put it to kind of like where they don't even work on these things. But yeah, my wife's uncle, he's an older guy. He was in the Corps Army Engineers, and I asked him, when the fires were happening in California and stuff, I said, is this because they stopped controlled burns? And he said yes.
Well, right. And I think, like from a naturalistic standpoint, wildfires happen if you just take a chunk of land and you don't do anything with it, and it's got any kind of vegetation. Wildfires are a natural part of a cyclic thing that occurs in them. And you see it in California. I mean, there's certain seeds that like won't grow unless they are burned in a fire. And I hate to say it like this because it sounds kind of bad, but like kind of seems like this is what happens when you don't manage land for 30 years. And when you say it's privately owned, are we talking like neighborhoods with houses, or are we talking like somebody conglomerate owns?
Okay, let me look it up, because it originally was owned by Hawaii Canaan, HCNS. That's what we always called it. But they bailed out. The land was Alexander and Baldwin. So those are like what would you say, like missionary era landowners doing sugar. So like
pretty much.
Sorry, what's that?
I said developers. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but no, like, yeah, they become developers, but they were plantation owners originally, and they sold it to other, like a lot of the land that's was ag land on the isthmus was sold to a company. It's funny. This is something that they do here that's really insidious. Is they'll like brand companies like with Hawaiian names, and kind of like sheep's clothing. Like
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, like so like one of the landowners is Mahi Pono, but it's really just a California company with some like Japanese investment, but it
They're like
sounds
all
Hawaiian.
companies, basically. Like, hey, look, we're y'all. Oh wait, no, we're not.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There's
yeah, they
there's
do.
there's some property laws in Tennessee where so outside interests basically can't come in, buy up a ton of land, and then basically develop it, rent it, whatever, like on a large scale. So there's like some different types of rules and regulations to keep that in check. And one of the things that have been going on through different channels that I know is that there are extremely wealthy entities from like California and different places like that come in here and get buddy with contractors that have been contractors here for like 40, 50 years, and then basically hire them to be the face. And then if anything, if there's any kind of investigation, it's like, oh, what? I've been here for whatever many years and everything. And then it's all good. But most of these huge developments around Nashville that have been blowing up are that. Like there's not like a ton of internal resources going to that. And it's like a really weird thing to where you get this feeling like you'll be shut up if you go too far down the rabbit hole. But that's very real. I know what you're kind of alluding to.
Yeah, that's a huge problem here in Hawaii, and I'd like to say, also even within the quote unquote Hawaiian establishment, the large funds, CAM schools, which is actually their Kamehameha school, and their larger investment body, and then there's Bishop Estates, and those are like one of the largest land trusts in the world, and they are supposed to be like the sort of the protectorate, be like that, protecting Hawaiian interest body and like wealth. They do a lot for education and other things, but they definitely like I've worked on some projects where they use that veil of it being Hawaiian to sell, vacation rentals on the Big Island, and they're developing a lot of the land here on Oahu. You could argue for the better, but in the end, they end up putting up condominium like apartment buildings, large like 30-story apartment buildings that like are $1 million for like a 2-bedroom.
Man. Wow.
So like you can't. It's obviously not for the local people.
No. Okay, now all right, you said earlier that you had the highest standard agricultural kind of like watch group. Are you talking in terms of like, okay, if 96 there were or either even before that in terms of controlled the managed forest fires, is it more for like endangered species of fauna and stuff, or is it more CO2?
Yeah, so like imagine the permitting process anywhere. You're going to have things like that, like indigenous endemic species, all the basic EPA environmental study type things,
Right.
but just really just onerous, like red tape.
Yeah.
Like we have so like I think I don't know if you guys picked up on some of the conspiracy theory being that the governor issued an emergency proclamation prior to the fire, dealing with development and permitting.
No. That's very interesting.
It is interesting, but there's a double edge to it. One is that it's true. What his emergency proclamation says is that that there's a housing crisis in Hawaii, and in order to expedite the building of affordable and non-affordable developments, we need to like cut through that red tape and sort of like give the office of the governor power to like acquire or designate lands for affordable housing or development. and that's true. It's a real thing. It's a real proclamation. I don't know that it will even really matter for Lahaina, but it's a real thing, and also what he's saying is a real thing. So I don't like that it's a proclamation. I don't know why you can't just change the zoning and permitting laws. Why you need like an authoritarian top-down problem solving, for that. I think that's what makes people kind of freaked out. I mean, the thing is, I don't like to think of it like a conspiracy theory, but there's just so many things like that actual emergency manager that I talk about that ended up having to step down by saying his name is Undaya. That's his last name. Having to step down. He was on Oahu. He wasn't even on Maui. He was at guess what? A FEMA conference.
Oh man.
And
Wow.
the governor was on vacation, and the mayor of Maui, I think, was he was around, but he didn't even know. I don't think he even knew of the secondary fire until later, until it had already happened. But yeah, it's ripe. It's definitely ripe for.
Yeah. Is your hunch leaning towards general land grabbing activity? Like,
I would say
if like, okay, here's a problem. Not necessarily that it was intentionally caused. Clearly, this might have been just negligence. But since we have a problem, let's do some stuff here.
Yeah, everyone is concerned about that.
Okay.
Everyone, and especially the people in Lahaina themselves. That's a huge concern. That's a huge concern. There, I don't know if they show it on the news over there, but basically the government did nothing in the first week to help anybody in Lahaina. So all the donations and everything weren't actually getting to them via the government. They were actually getting to them like by citizens. So citizens were actually breaking through, let's say, figuratively breaking through barricades, breaking through blockades, by like taking boats and jet skis and whatever kind of watercraft they could to that side of the island, which was blocked off by road, to bring supplies in. And this is all just like citizens.
Wow.
The emergency hubs were built by citizens in different parks on the west side, so north of Lahaina. And they weren't letting anybody in for like over a week. So
where
it's
were
basically
like the celebrities? Like we've heard, like Oprah's house and their celebrities' houses were like conveniently bypassed by these fires and everything.
Yeah, I would say that they were spared, but I don't think they were in any danger to begin with.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Or would they had like superior irrigation, or why?
They just weren't in the fire zone.
Okay, so basically these pictures we're seeing of just grids of decimation and then one in the middle, like that's
that
is that
happens,
kind of
but that happens. That definitely is real, but I don't. None of those are their properties as far as I know.
Okay, so that's the tricky thing. That's what some people I know around here don't get. It's like you can get some images, but I have no idea whose name is on that
Right,
deed.
who owns it, right?
And you can attach a whole bunch of meaning by just saying that's Oprah's or whoever, Bezos or. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's their homes. They wouldn't live in the middle of town with people.
Yeah, I would picture like a giant gated in, like just massive amount of acreage.
They do. They live on huge, like they buy up old ranch land, and that's it's cheaper that way, because they're ag, and somehow they write themselves into being able to build little dwellings on it that are.
Hey, if you got Amazon lawyers, I can see figuring out a way to get in there. Yeah.
But I like I want to say it, man, and I don't think I'm stepping over anything. But man, like our politicians are whores, dude. Like I swear to God, like the amount that they give out, I would like to hear more about what kind of laws they have in Tennessee, because that's what everybody wants here. It's a
Well,
huge
I
problem,
mean-
and it's part of.
Yeah, you really don't.
Even those laws, man, they only work as much as they're enforced. And like he's saying with where he's at, and you've got a figurehead that is, they've been there for so long and they've worked in the community and all that stuff. Like, really, to me, the only question at this point is who stands to gain from what occurred and from letting it happen. And then I mean, I hate to be that guy who's like, oh, Watergate, but at the same time, like, it's pretty obviously looking like if this wasn't done on purpose, it was purposefully ignored enough to do the damage that it did.
Man, I don't rule that out at all. So, I mean, it's like a horrible thought. It's a really horrible thought, but like I don't rule it out. I think that like you're right. I think everyone is like very concerned about the future and what will happen, because you got to understand that these people, like, either they have generational property that's underinsured, meaning like they own the property and it's underinsured, so like rebuild is going to be very difficult for them, or they are mortgaging the property, which now, like, most of the people that live in Lahaina work in Lahaina or in the neighboring towns, and they're going to be out of work, or they're going to have less work because now the tourists aren't coming. So basically they're getting priced out, like, just by the sheer action of the devastation, just like right off the bat. And they're sitting on multi-million-dollar property. That's the thing, is the price just keeps going up and up. So it's gonna happen regardless of like it being fully orchestrated. And the question is who's going to let it happen? Because, like, it's already happening. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a big part of what, like, I don't know if you've seen much of it, but the sovereignty movement is about in Hawaii is really about, like, it's always been about, like, people gathering up, like, taking the land and just selling it, and just being priced out of the place. Like, I think like the majority of Hawaiians don't live in Hawaii. That's like just
so.
Like,
I don't know like 100% the details of exactly what was happening, but to the best of my understanding, from, again, and this is like secondhand from people who I happen to know, they were being told by people on the island that the sovereignty movement was full tilt ready to take physical actions in order to preserve the land that they had. That's what they were saying. From my understanding of it, they were going there to kind of like train these folks in how to actually do that.
Okay, let's just say it's never how I say, peace is usually the action, right? But okay, let me say it like this: the Hawaiians have like a few major gods, about four major gods, but two of them that were sort of seasonally worshipped were Lono, which is a peaceful agricultural god, and the other one is Ku, which is a war god. And in some respects, there's like a flip, like a trigger. Like, they say, like, people in Hawaii, they're the nicest people you'll ever meet. But like, there's a trigger, there's like a flip side. And so, yeah, I don't want to say, but I think that in this case, okay, I'm going to say that you're not wrong, but I'm not going to say that you're right. You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, I get it, man. And like, it's annoying for me to speak on it because there's so much, like I said, it's basically like redacted. You know what I mean? I can't really go into a lot of details on it.
I guess what I'm saying is, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I guess what I'm saying is, you know, it is get there. There's a point in which, because I don't want to get anybody in trouble or like start some salacious rumor or something, but there's sort of a point in which where people can't stand it anymore. And having this be an event like this, if it does go down the path that everyone's kind of expecting it to, given the track record of the leadership of Hawaii and what they do in terms of never really working for the people, you know, there's sort of like,
well, yeah, man, and I think that's like kind of the broader problem is like a hungry people won't stay hungry for long. We have seen this historically speaking over and over again, where like you can push somebody a lot, and then like it just takes one douchebag to say let them eat cake, and like heads are rolling. You know?
Yeah.
That's a thing.
Yeah, for the most part, right now it's very peaceful. It's very angry. People are very angry, like they've always been, but like at this point, it's I would say, like, you know, the sovereignty movement and the thoughts of Hawaiians and people of Hawaii have always been kind of a little bit fragmented because we have such a diverse background, so we kind of have a diverse viewpoint. But I think after this event, like the views are kind of lining up, and I think that might, you know, hopefully not, but hopefully also that it's a recipe for change that is in the positive. Hopefully it doesn't have to be done in that way, but I think that the mind is sort of like the thought process is started clicking. Like almost everybody overnight knew what the narrative was. Like conspiracy theory or not, like the narrative was like almost overnight was like they're trying to burn us out and take the land. Like almost everybody across the board knew that on a gut level, like that.
Yeah. Like if you take all the you know, direct energy weapons and strip all that nonsense away, it's essentially the same fear.
Yeah, no doubt, and it's not a conspiracy theory. Like that's what people feel, and because of the history, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, and so with this history you're talking about, man, like in your lifetime, is that a commonly held belief amongst the people you encounter day to day? Like, are we talking Southern Ireland? Like, yes, this is just kind of on the low, but it's a thing we all kind of agree on, or are we talking pockets of extremists?
Are you talking about revolution, like armed revolution?
I'm just talking about the sovereignty in general for Hawaii.
Right. Okay, sovereignty movement, I would say, has always been there, like, because it was an overthrown sovereign nation, right? It was a protectorate at one point, even while it was a kingdom. But that's not. I don't think that's the same thing as like a territory, and it ends up being after the overthrow. And then not until like 1959 does it become a state. But so the different iterations of a sovereignty movement has existed. There were armed rebellions where the leaders were thrown in prison and sentenced to death, but given a pardon because they were going to be considered martyrs. You know, so like there was definitely revolutionary period in the late 1800s because the overthrow, I believe, was 1893, or is it 6? I guess I'd have to look that up, but it's either 93 or 96. I'm sorry, I feel like stupid for not knowing, but in that whole period, it was like spycraft. I mean, like the crazy thing about the overthrow is it's like it was a secret society that overthrew the Kingdom of Hawaii. It was called the Committee of Safety. So yeah, I mean, okay, so to answer the question, it's always been part of the history, but there's never really an overt militia or But there are
Right, it's
people
not
with
like
that,
the
that
open group.
attitude. There's people with that attitude for sure. There's people with that attitude for sure. I mean, it's culturally there, you know, where there can be an active disdain for outsiders, like physical violence.
Right.
You know, but as far as an organized, I mean, it must be so organized that it's not really spoken of like that publicly.
Well, so let me ask you this too, because, and forgive my ignorance, I just genuinely don't know. You know, you're saying the different peoples, there are so many different kinds of. Do you mean that in that there are different tribes of Native Hawaiians, or do you mean that in that now there are so many different, as in people have moved there and that kind of thing? Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about?
So like, if you think of it like this, like, you know, in first contact, it was primarily Native Hawaiians and English people, and then during the and maybe like, you know, some like small pockets of other people, but really it wasn't until the plantation era. Oh, sorry, my son is crying. It wasn't until the plantation era that there was like large populations of Japanese, Filipino, Portuguese.
Okay.
And so like that the Hawaii that most people know now is a combination of that. So then by having that, then you have sort of like all kinds of like spiritual beliefs and like inclinations towards certain ways of thinking. So there's not like there is like a unified Hawaiian culture, like Hawaii culture, let's say, that's not like indigenous. But the sort of, when it comes to politics, it's not unified. You know what I'm saying? As far as
Right.
like,
There's no like central head of a thing that isn't organized. And again, like
yeah,
going back to Ireland, but like you have Southern Ireland and they're all unified by the fact that they're Catholic, right? So you have this thing that holds them together. And even over the years, it has broken up into different groups, but they've been known to get with other groups of IRA and carry out whatever thing it is they're doing. And that's just kind of what I was confused on, was because you said that I didn't know if that was. I see what you're saying. It's just a mix of people over time that have kind of come together, and now everybody's kind of at the same page where they're like, well, we live here, and these folks.
Right. So like the sovereignty movement would be Native Hawaiians, and the Native Hawaiians that would have like deeper historical knowledge, had struggled, had families that were in water rights, land rights struggles for decades, if not like century, you know. So there's going to be sort of a lineage, but then it becomes more and more popular. It spreads in what they call the Hawaiian Renaissance in the I believe in the early 70s. And so then the sovereignty movement really took shape in a large amount more recently, with like right after, remember, Standing Rock, and was that North Dakota, the Standing Rock protests?
North Dakota. Yep.
And so I think on the cue of that, there was protests on the Big Island. That's Hawaii Island. That's where the when you see the images of the volcano erupting and stuff. That's that we call it the Big Island. That's it's called Hawaii. So that island there, where the summit that isn't active, is it active now? Anyway, Mauna Kea. They were going to build satellites, star observers, telescopes rather, observation telescopes, and there were some issues with land use on that and spiritual practices on Mauna Kea, and the conflict between that and this telescope, and then there became like a huge movement there, and so that element is at the center of this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Lahaina is Lahaina, even though it's very multicultural, it definitely has it's very strong in the sovereignty movement because of its history. So that town is like it's the original capital of Hawaii. So that's like before there was even a kingdom. The kingdom started there, if that makes sense. So it starts there. It moves to Oahu, where I'm located in Honolulu. And so and even before that, there was constant wars between the Big Island, the Hawaii Island, and Maui. So I don't know if that helps the context, but
No, it definitely does, because it clarifies, like, again, as an outsider, somebody who's never been to Hawaii, clearly I've like never seen this island. It's just interesting to me because, again, like looking at it from a historic standpoint, you always have where a group of people, whoever they are, wherever in the world, they're willing to put up with so much to a point, and then that point is usually, and I mean, it's not always. I'm not like, I don't want to be misconstrued as like I'm advocating for like violent revolution.
Right. No one is, right?
Sometimes it's just a political shift or enough unified voice to cause a change. And I want to be very clear on this too. I'm not saying that violent revolution is never the answer, right? Like, I'm not saying that you should, as a person, as an individual, as a people, whatever, I don't think you should allow anything to just constantly kick you around and just put up with it. Even I think that is a universal thing. We all have homes. We all have somewhere we live. You go to messing with that, and like you're pushing the wrong thing. And it sounds to me, and again, uninformed, complete outsider on this, it sounds to me like y'all are dealing with generations of being pushed around on your own land, and that it's being bought up and taken by the wealthy because it's very valuable. And that's what it sounds to me like this whole fire really is. Again, like, I get that sounds very conspiracy theorist. However, like, historically speaking, we can point and say, like, governments will allow things to happen if it benefits them, right?
Yeah. And so the track record would say that it's almost a certainty that people with money will take advantage of the situation, and the people that live here and work here and are from here who have less means on average will suffer.
Oh,
will
for
lose
sure.
out.
And so I guess my biggest question is, who stands to gain the most here? Like, that's kind of, I'm still unclear as to specifically who would benefit the most from this situation.
Okay, well, here's the kicker, right? So they want to they've had meetings about creating smart cities, and also there's large developments happening on Oahu, and these developments are backed by outside investment. I would say, like, the most recent one on Oahu was Howard Hughes. But a lot of this is BlackRock. A lot of this investment's BlackRock. BlackRock owns our utility. But it's coupled in with the Kamehameha schools, or the Kamehameha investment company or firm. I'm not exactly sure what the title is for that, but it's basically the investment arm of Kamehameha schools, which is a sort of a trust. And so they have a lot of the private land, I would say, public private land, but I would say that it's private. And they're doing a lot of the development that's happening in Honolulu. So, like, some of the older industrial areas, or like more rundown parts of town, are being like gentrified or revitalized right now. There are large projects going on, from sort of, let's say, if most people would know Waikiki. So from Waikiki all the way on into near the airport are being redeveloped right now.
I mean, revitalize is a weird way to say, like, the natives are moving out and they're opening it up. Yeah,
revitalizes.
Yeah, and then they use Native Hawaiian imagery and history. It's called cultural tourism. So they'll use that imagery to sell the development. Like I wish I could show you pictures maybe in the future, but they'll, like, when they put up a construction wall, around a skyscraper that they're going to put up, like, say like a 30-40 foot floor skyscraper, that would be a construction wall at the base, and they'll put up imagery showing like old, like they'll go into the archives and show old kalo terraces, like wetland mud terraces, or like salt pans that once existed there, and then use like locational names. And it's almost offensive, because it's like, oh, here's your rich history, bye.
Yeah, no, dude. So they do the same thing. Like, and it's different because it's not a cultural history thing as much as it is like a local history, I guess. And they'll put up these pictures of, say a main drag through our center of our city. They'll show it from the 50s or whatever. And it's interesting too here for us, in that the majority of people who live here are black. And so that was the big thing here, was we had a lot of black-owned businesses once upon a time. So they'll show these storefronts that were locally owned by people in the community. And we're talking like still Jim Crow law era. These guys were like pulling themselves up and opening businesses, and they had thriving communities here. And they'll show that while they're putting in some Walgreens, that, you know what I mean, like just something so detached from anything local, so corporate from anything that these people wanted to have in their communities. And I get it. It's definitely kind of insulting, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
this reminds me back.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, this just reminds me back on our first chat about the hijacking of kind of the art language and using it for different means.
Yeah, true. Like, when we talked about the KillGrid, I was talking about like Adbusters and how the left will use sort of the rebellious underground, DIY punk rock aesthetic to sell like their basically socialist, like Fabian socialist third way, they call it third wave, but it's like third way really is what it is, where it's like the synthesis of big capital and socialism. And they'll sell that, which is essentially what the environmental movement is. And they'll use that to sort of to get the creative force, the sort of empathetic force of people to buy into this sort of quote unquote revolutionary aspect. And that's another danger that exists in Hawaii, is that they can weaponize sort of the indigenous population to take on this ideas of smart cities and sustainability, because so much of what not to say that it's entirely bad, but we kind of know like sort of the sinister aspects of it. Because Hawaii has a sustainable history, it's an island. You need to be sustainable, otherwise you die. So there is a long history of water management and land management. There was a brutal system of punishment prior to contact for misuse of resources. So say if you misused water or misused farmlands, you would be executed. So like that's the kind of sustainability that existed before. I think sometimes it gets kind of played up a little bit, in this sort of modern world where it's like, oh, we were really one with the island and all that. And I think that that's true, but I think it came at a brutal cost. And not that something can't be hybridized, with modern technology and ancient like actual knowledge of agriculture and aquaponics and things like that, or what would you call, what is it called, horticulture.
Yeah.
And so, but there's dangers in that, and I think it's something that I try to point out time to time when I think in presentation I'm working on. It's like that hijacking of image, of aesthetic, is like super dangerous here, and I think anywhere really, especially when you look at like what we call like the WEF, the sort of New World Order stuff. It's like their marketing is so slick. Like I don't see why like more people don't, like I'm actually surprised how many people don't just, well, I guess, how would I say, I'm not surprised how so many people buy into it. It's just, it's so attractive, it's so well done, and for those that have like a big heart and they believe that these things are happening in the way that they're said, I don't see why they wouldn't, you know. And so that's, I think, for me, the big danger for this event is like that shit can get used. But
Yeah.
there are strange things too that happened. Strange, you know, legends and just strange, what would you call, like symbolic aspects of this fire that's totally crazy.
yeah.
You'd said earlier that there was a religious aspect for a lot of the people there. Is there a specific event or a specific thing that ties into the religion that you were referencing?
Okay, well, what I mean is, what I was saying is, you know, people are gonna go like, "How dare you talk about conspiracy theories? This is a tragic event." And I'm saying, I was saying that, like, I have family that lived through it. My family's from there. I grew up in that town. For people to get upset that we are talking sort of like outside of the regular narrative, I don't think is even true for the people on the ground, is kind of what I'm saying. And there's a spirituality to people in Hawaii that ranges from Christian to sort of a slight like native folklore. So how would I say, like, people view it in that respect. Anybody that goes through an event like that are going to view it like that. They're going to view like I could have only made it because of a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right.
You know what I'm saying? They're going to view it that way. So for it to be considered disrespectful to talk about it in any sort of supernatural sense, or any like out of the lines of regular empirical data, like I think is like that's actually the most disconnected way to like interpret it. In the sense, if you were to use, like, you know, a plea to emotion, like, how could you talk about this when people are suffering? You know, the people that are suffering are viewing it in a religious sense, like, if that makes sense, in a sort of a non-provable sense.
And I don't think the issue is like, oh, how could you possibly think that there's something else at play here? I mean, I think the bigger point is, if it ever comes out that we can prove whoever did whatever, wouldn't it be better that we go ahead and get that out there so we can prevent such things in the future? Because, I mean, I think we have a long-standing track record of the U.S. government not exactly being... I mean, the Tuskegee experiments, man, they declassed files from the Cuban Missile Crisis where they were going to stage mass shootings to stage as the ones doing it to prompt a war from America to Cuba. I mean, it's not unheard of that they would do an atrocity for benefit. And
you know, you're right. And so, like, I wouldn't, like, it's inconclusive what started this fire. Most likely it's probably going to end up being the electrical lines. They probably didn't de-energize them in the first fire, but you know, what did we have, like, but like a week or two later, you have people, like, what was it, 60 some individuals, maybe it was 30, I'm a bit dyslexic, individuals were arrested for arson in Greece for their fires. So, like, this is happening, you know, this Extinction Rebellion, accelerationist, it's happening. And so, like, although there is a historical record of wildfires in the area, and the extent of the winds being so high, it's not surprising that it started.
Right.
But the sort of the colossal failure of response is it leaves too many questions to be left unanswered at this point, and the government for sure is delaying. They're delaying the count of the dead. They're delaying, by having the emergency manager step down, you would think that that's a prudent thing, but in a sense, it kind of really delayed things, because then the new person coming in is now having to say, I'm responding to ongoing emergencies, and I'm just catching up. I have no idea what was said on that day, and I'm having to learn new details. And so it just every step they're given more and more opportunities to delay them coming out with what they call the after action investigation, like basically like a report. And the crazy thing is, and everybody's already caught on to this, is like, who the chief of police is?
No.
Pelletier was a chief of police at the Vegas shootings at the Mandalay.
What?
What?
Yeah, isn't that insane? So the guy who's like counting the bodies and directing the crisis.
It is his job.
Yeah,
He's already bad at his job, and he goes to get a job on Maui, and he actually asked for a raise prior to this, but whatever, I guess that, but the average wage of the police officers didn't go up with his bid.
So again, man, like, I understand the sensitivity around such a topic. I totally get that. I do.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think
there's a lot of crazy stuff, dude.
Well, it's not even just that. From a practical aspect, man, like, they dropped the ball so many times to the point where if nothing else out of this is actually a problem, like something that was planned or whatever, it's clearly showing huge issues with the infrastructure, with their ability to respond to an emergency. I mean, like, again, podunk little police officer over here, right? We would shut power off to whole streets if we had fires to ensure that things didn't get worse. I mean, there's protocol that goes into play anytime you have any kind of a fire, and it sounds like they did none of the things. Like,
yeah, all this was a very new government, if that makes sense, like a very freshman government. And and the lack of sustained care, like, because of the focus on sustainability issues, even the power company was delaying their the changing of the poles because they wanted to wait till the new technology came in, so they didn't want to put any money back into the infrastructure. But yeah, what's even crazier is they were blocking people in the town. They were routing people into the town and blocking them in the town because they didn't know how to manage the traffic because of all the down power lines. So they were mismanaging the traffic and locking people into the town that was on fire.
So I have heard. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
Well, no, on the island, it's not buried electrical infrastructure, like even like a percentage of it. It's mostly in the air.
Yeah.
I would think on an island that would be. Oh.
No, like this, the infrastructure is 100 years old at least. Like,
okay.
Like it's still like matchstick, like wooden poles.
Right. See, we got we have a lot of wires in our air, but there's a few sections that got decimated in downtown by the tornadoes, and so a lot of stuff they were just like put it all underground. So it's just I don't know what your kind of weather. I know it's more the Pacific isn't the Atlantic, but yeah. So okay.
Yeah, like that could have happened. But that kind of infrastructure improvements don't normally happen here. We end up with a rail system that we don't necessarily need that costs billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And they do stuff like that. Like they slap a rail in the middle of Honolulu that I don't see it being used by a large majority of people. or it really changing much. In terms of like, go ahead.
It's also, I'm just saying, it's based on also the actual, like the soil. So
you mean like
yeah, a majority of Hawaii is actually based on volcanic soil. So it's a very like mesh kind of like a sooty kind of thing because it's basically volcanic looking soil. So,
What do you mean? Like that's why they don't bury the poles? Is that what you're saying?
that's why they don't do buried cable and stuff
lines? Okay.
versus aerial.
Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely like. Okay, go ahead.
No. No, go ahead. I don't want you to miss your thought. I do want to say something about the rail, though.
No, I'm agreeing. I was just agreeing with Clark. Yeah, there's a lot of hollow areas, and there's hard areas and really soft areas, and it's not very uniform.
Yeah. I got you. No, it's interesting to me what you're saying about the rail and that it's not necessarily a necessity, and yet they pour in like all this money. There was a project like that here where we had a mayor named Megan Barry that was later left in disgrace. She had to, I forget it, I think she was kicked out. She was pressured to resign, but she basically was having an affair with her security guard, and we're using taxpayer money to go on holiday and all of these resorts and stuff. So she got kicked out fast. But right before she got kicked out, one of the things that was the big deal was they were going to put a subway system in Nashville, which if anybody knows anything about that town, it's like that's the stupidest thing ever. So they had the whole line, and it was scheduled to be like this was years ago, and it like right now it wouldn't have even been done. We're still 6 years away, and billions of dollars. And if you were to use a trajectory of like how much influx of new people versus the traffic versus how many people would actually use that rail by that year, it was like completely a useless project, but she was the major head of it. And I guarantee you, if you look at these projects where there's these projects in different cities, like the big monorail or whatever, just look at all the different contractors or all the different connections where, the red tape's lifted. I guarantee you there's like the billions of dollars. There's like this lining of pockets that slowly goes down. It's hard to trace, but it's happening.
Yeah.
That just annoys me.
Dude, I think that's any kind of when you see anything like that go up in these cities and stuff, someone somewhere is benefiting from it. And I don't mean like the people who get to use whatever it is, right? Like the reason they do things, politicians, I mean, when I say that, is to line their pockets. And like she had to leave in disgrace, guarantee you she left with a nice little nest egg. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, probably. I mean, but it goes to show the character of the person that's the person who was bringing in this big grand plan to Nashville like it was, the hot ticket. It's just completely corrupt. But
well, and I think that's a major problem in general is if you look at the kind of people who run for any kind of office, they're not the kind of people you want holding an office, right?
Right. Yeah. Yep. I could go on and on and on about that. Sorry.
No, you're good, man.
Yeah.
Well, it's infuriating when you look at, and again, like because of my background, I can tell you anyone who wants a position of authority, like generally speaking, I would say about 87% minimum. It's not for any kind of a good reason. Right.
That makes a lot of sense. See, the problem in the whole world is that sociopaths have like the keys to the kingdom. They naturally rise to the highest echelons just naturally. That's the whole problem. But
yeah.
If you don't care what other people think about, it's easy to step on some toes.
Yeah, you should see the arrogance of the response and like the press conferences that are happening here.
Oh man.
I don't know if they're really televising that or putting that out, but it's like
I'm sure I can find it online.
Yeah.
Everything I've seen has just been snippets. I haven't seen like a full press conference myself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily need to play it. This becomes more complicated, but people can look it up. So the Maui County would be the area that people would be looking up, and like the mayor is Bisson, I think his last name. He was actually a judge on Maui before he was mayor, and I believe it's already come out that the emergency manager was a nepotism hire, meaning he didn't have any actual experience for the job, as well as not being there on the day, and he was sort of hired in like because he was the nephew of somebody or something like that.
So it's the nephew.
Unfortunately he has family in Lahaina, so like his name is pretty much Mud. That family's name is Mud now, but crazy things. I mean, but it is strange, like so when you're talking about like sort of like the religious aspects or like the symbolic aspects, the wind that came in that day, so it was very windy from the hurricane Dora in the south, but the wind that would come down the valley, there's actually like a name for that type of wind, that sound, that whipping, the wind that like kind of like you hear it before you feel it. My auntie who escaped, she described the wind reminding her of this thing called the Papuli winds, or like the Makeman winds, sort of like a haunted wind. It's basically just like the wind comes down a valley and it makes a whistling sound before you even feel it. Does that make sense?
And is that like a bad omen?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like a haunted thing. So that was the type of wind that was happening on that day.
You see that thing a lot in like tsunamis and stuff. Like native tribes know that there's actually going to be a swell before there's actually a swell. So like thing with like the 2004, like the big Indonesian tsunami, like that was the big thing. But like the native tribes knew to go up into the hills, get off the shore before the actual like tsunami hit, because they felt it and they knew that was coming. So
they knew how to read it.
Yeah.
Oh. And then interestingly, like the alma mater of Lahaina, Lahaina Luna, the high school out there. So the song, it speaks of so like the logo or the insignia for the school is like a torch, like a lamplight, like a torch, and it talks about that school, the sort of like as like a light for the Pacific, and that light couldn't be blown out by the winds of like that area, like so that very wind that started the fire, which you could say was part of the fire, is in the song for the high school. And also, like, an interesting thing is, and I'm not saying that these things are connected, it's more like symbolically than like causal. I'm not saying that it's a cause, it's just like symbolic things. The fact that it's on 808 is like more of a symbolic thing than it is pointing to anything causal. But like another thing that's interesting is so Lahaina, like I said, it was like part of like the Hawaiian kingdom in the beginning. As a location, there was, it's very arid, but at one time, even with its aridness, because of its location on the island, they had like breadfruit trees like planted everywhere, and so it was very shady. And there was a spring in the middle of town, or near the middle of town. There was like a freshwater spring that would pop up. And in that spring there was an island, and that was where the royal like a palace, like a little pavilion was located. And the chiefs of Maui, like the ruling chief family of Maui, were descendants from a reptilian lizard goddess. And there was a marriage between the chiefs of the Big Island and the chiefs of Maui. Eventually they would fight, and then that would be Kamehameha's. So it was kind of like a inter-family fight, so to speak, between the Big Island and Maui that would become like the Hawaiian Kingdom. But there was that union, there was a death of the chiefess, and there was a ritual that was performed to bring that ancient, what they call the mo'o, which is this reptilian goddess, into the body of the dead chiefess, like invoke her ancestry from the dead chiefess, and then put her into like an effigy, and then carry that around at wartime. So there's sort of this like, yeah, so like there's sort of this like
pretty badass.
Yeah, it's this. That's the kind of people that existed there before contact. That's how they viewed things. And when the kingdom was moved to Honolulu, that island where they believed this reptilian goddess like resided, that little island in the spring, it's called Moku'ula. That island got buried over. So
what do you mean buried over?
So say, how's it buried over? Is it sunk, or
like they buried over the spring, so they filled it in.
Oh.
And so for like over 100 years, well over 100 years, this thing remained buried. I walked on, it was like a rec center, like, like a field, like baseball fields and tennis courts and stuff. I would walk on it all the time, and you could kind of feel the ground was a little bit spongy.
Weird. It is so strange.
But what's interesting is just recently they unearthed it.
How do you spell? Hold on. I want to pull this up for myself.
Called. So the goddess is Kahi Wahine.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a KAHIWAIHINE. Oh wait, am I doing? I got it backwards. I swear, I have this dyslexia. It's Kiha.
Oh, okay.
So it's Kiha Wahine. That means woman. It's like the feminine.
Oh, 2 words. I gotcha.
No, it's one word. In Hawaiian they don't really separate words. When you have descriptors. Okay. So, so it's kind of.
And like, what would her title be?
So, she's like an ancient god, but then so like that's the deity.
Gotcha.
The lizard deity. and then you P.E. Lonnie is the chief. So like that road, that highway that they were trying to get everybody onto that burnt down when the fire was burned, they're talking about moving from Front Street. Everyone was actually trying to escape onto the highway, get off of Front Street, get out of the thing, and go either north or south on the highway. The highway is called Hoa P.E. Lonnie Highway, and it's named after this chief, P.E. Lonnie.
Okay. I'm on the Wikipedia, but I can kind of jut off from links from here.
Yeah. So you can get a sense of. I think they have like the family tree and stuff. It's a bit sorted, but
Interesting.
yeah. So like, there's a lot of that. I mean, that they believed that when you see the tikis, they call them tikis.
Yeah.
That's like the Tahitian form of the word kiki.
It's kind of like a kneeling statuette.
Yeah. Oh, are you looking at her?
Uh-huh.
Crazy, right? She actually had red hair like attached to her at one point, and those are human teeth.
Wow. So you're saying the freshwater pond was filled in, and then enough time went by, and then later on construction kind of commenced?
Well, there was like a movement to revitalize, that's not the right word, but to like resurrect it, to bring it back, to bring the pond back and its functionality and everything. And that started in like the early 2000s and just recently like took shape. I don't think it was ever completed, but it was unearthed.
Wow.
So,
yeah. If it's a spring, it's gonna be there.
Yeah,
Man,
it was
so
unearthed,
cool.
and so there's sort of this like, is there like, what did you uncover something that like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That not to say that it's wrong. I think there's going to be a lot of push in the future to like bring that aspect of Lahaina back, and I would agree with that. But there's a lot of sort of spiritual energy when you like desecrate sort of the land of a reptilian goddess that like spans all the islands.
Yeah.
I mean, she's supposedly like a water dragon in a sense, but like, so it kind of has a sort of a Chinese, like an Asian nature to it. It's a little bit,
Yes.
I think it's a little bit older than like some of the native gods there, sort of like the Ku and the Lono and the Wakea and stuff. And but
Man,
it still
just
was
the
a
fact
venerated
that there were
deity.
Well, just the fact that there were kingdoms deep in the Pacific at all always blows my mind. I mean, even Easter Island, even Hawaii, and some of the other islands out west. It just blows my mind that there were not only just kingdoms, but long enough to have tons of histories.
Yeah. Millions of people.
I just don't. It's hard for me to wrap my head around it because it's like the distance, the isolation versus like what I'm used to. It gets my imagination going for sure.
Man, it's quite something, the history. It feels like when you think about dinosaurs and like lava, like it kind of feels like that. Like there's definitely peace, but there's definitely war. Like the savage, I don't want to use the word savagery, but that's like in a way, like there was definitely brutalness, in it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
there's also like, of course there's like any people, there's love and wanting to prosper and like a sense of unifying and things. Like it's not all one way.
Right.
But yeah, it's like you think of like feudal Japan, like how brutal that was.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
There's similarities in the sort of things that were going on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this event leading to like if not a unifying of everybody, a more like a return to a more traditional thing for everybody on the island? Or do you what do you see the long-term effects of this being?
Okay, yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because this is a big point that I wanted to make, and maybe hopefully a good way to like wrap it up a little bit. I think that there has always been a desire to maintain and bring back the indigenous ways, which would be just like any indigenous old school agricultural sustainable, like classic sustainable means of living with the land and the resources. I don't think that I think that there's like a desire to preserve that history, but I don't think in the future there's any like sense that it could only be done exactly traditionally. I think that there is a possibility of like hybridization with newer technologies. I don't know that anyone's really trying to move it back into like grass huts or, you know, stone and wood housing, you know.
Yeah.
But I think that the sort of the mentality which they had was sort of a system that moved from the mountain to the sea. They call it's like called a Moku districting system where they district out like valley to sea, and in what they call the Aupua, which is basically just from the mountain culture all the way down to sea culture, and that being like a trading system within the valley. And that's how the land was divided. So I think there's a desire to get those back. They're renaming a lot of the places. They put up signs to rename a lot of the places in that respect. But I would say, like, what I see happening is, you know, with this event is it's definitely a turning point for Hawaii, in the sense that what happens to Lahaina like will symbolically usher in the future of Hawaii. So if Lahaina can maintain local control, if it could even like bring about a cultural renaissance that's like fully fulfilled, like practiced, substantiated in the environment, then that could symbolize like where it goes, like on like create a new precedent for what's possible. So there's that sort of optimism that people have for the future, but then there's what we spoke about in length earlier, is that pessimism of what's the track record, what's the history, what's likely to happen. So there is a tension between those two ideas. Mm-hmm. And I think whatever people do, whatever they manifest in the future, like whichever idea wins out, and I say like with the symbolism, with the use of aesthetic, there's a danger that one could be used to sell the other. A utopian view just to sell like rent vacation rentals, you know. But whatever happens, I think ultimately, I think it's a big enough event. It's a tragic enough event that it will solidify like a major, like it'll mark a major point in the history of Hawaii for sure.
Well, and I think, like, unfortunately, I think it usually does take a tragedy of some kind to really prompt any kind of change. And I mean, like, obviously, I don't know if I worded that well or not when I said, like, kind of reverting back to a more traditional existence. I mean, like, the Industrial Revolution happened, right? Like, we can't go before that. And I'm sure no one really wants to. Like, I hate to quote Ted Kaczynski here, but like the Industrial Revolution definitely did have unintended consequences. One of them is we got away from a lot of, especially indigenous peoples. It did kind of mark an end for a lot of traditional beliefs and systems held by a lot of those people. So like that's more what I mean is, are people kind of leaning back into, we are a unified group and this is our thing and we're going to do everything we can to preserve it? Or is that just not really in the equation at all yet?
Well, I think you're right. I think that when I was saying like for the first time, it really feels like everybody got the plot. So like, yes, there's always been sort of a movement to like get back to the land and like Hawaiian cultural values and like a resurgence of the language and all this bringing it back, all this like bringing it back to life has been going on, especially since the 80s. But as far as like really like people having a joint view on it, I think this is the first time. Like it almost overnight, like people all were saying the same thing. I've been hearing from people. It's almost like you already know what they're thinking. This is it. So I don't know if that will sustain, because this is not going to happen like overnight. It's going to take like a decade at least to like realize any of this. But I think that there is a moment where people are thinking the same thing. So it kind of just depends. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it kind of just depends on whether it can sustain.
We're not gonna figure out after, and I think that that's another thing. I think it's kind of a byproduct of the fact that it takes tragedy to affect change, right? Is that when you're comfortable, when everything's cool, nobody's worried about anything. Nobody's thinking about, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, until you have something, a catalyst for change, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's like, I think what the delay process, what the sort of, the government saying, oh, this is going to be long. I give them, their due in that, like, you have to recover the dead and you have to, look at environmental standards, but the way that they're blocking people from even going back to their own homes and using like, this emergency proclamation and this FEMA, what do you call, like, safety issues, EPA safety issues, to not even allow people to go back to see their own property. I mean, you're going to get like a $5,000 fine just walking into the town, which is insane.
Well, we all know how well FEMA like handles emergencies.
Yeah, amazing. But what I'm saying is, this weight game, sort of this drawing it out, is almost like it will have, whether intended or not, it could have the consequence of taking a lot of people's eye off the ball and allowing them to get back into complacency and just be like, oh, whatever happens, hopefully everybody gets a house and they live a happy life. But in the end, whatever happens is going to be like the will of whoever can sustain, like in Braveheart, like when they say just hold that position, like hold, like if you can hold, then they can win. But if it doesn't, then what would naturally happen would happen.
Right. And another question: has there been any talk of like settlement payouts of any kind to anybody who lost their home or anything? Because to me, that is a bribe to like not talk about things, or to at least just chill out and deal with whatever's happening. I'm just curious if they're already doing that or not.
Well, there's lawsuits flying this way and that way, so I don't think we're at that stage. And I think that's what my gripe is like, everybody wants to blame the utility company, and I think that, hey, maybe they are to blame, but like I think that's a red herring. It is owned by BlackRock, majorly, and I don't like, it's a utility company. I think people are like kind of like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna find them? They're not gonna like disappear. They may change their name, but like you still need electricity. So like it's basically gonna be the same people in control of the utility no matter what happens, whether they get sued or settlements are paid out. So like, yeah, you'll take the settlement, and I think that's what happened in Paradise, is people went for the lawsuit and then they split the lawsuit amongst all the survivors, and then they got like nothing.
Right.
So yeah, and then you think you're gonna get your payday and keep your house, but it's not gonna happen. So yeah.
Yeah, you throw $30,000 out between 10,000 people, and it's like, oh yeah, here's your 30 cents.
Yeah.
Right.
But that
I mean, that's what happened with the FEMA. The FEMA was like Biden's FEMA payout was $700 per household. Yeah. Most households in Hawaii are like 5+ people.
Five. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Divide that 700 up. Well, This was a very interesting talk. It went down some avenues I wasn't expecting. I've got kind of a list of things I would kind of want to do a deep dive on. But does anybody have any closing thoughts? Anything they want to say? Joe, if you want to tell us or tell the audience where they can find you.
Oh yeah, sure. Right now my major website is the KillGrid.com or on KillGrid. I kind of like haven't been putting a lot on that, but that was a major focus for me before this and before a few things, and I am still working on that. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the KillGrid.com.
Okay. Well, it has been an awesome episode. Thank you, Joseph and Clark, and I'm so sorry. I just met you.
Joey.
It is nice to meet you as well. But you know that old saying well, actually this is a pretty serious episode, so I'm just going to say I hope the listeners learned some stuff, and good night.
How do you feel?
Well, sir,